大家好，我是 Jenny， 欢迎来到沉思者 J。今天我们要认识的这个男人，是20世纪最具影响力的作家之一。他用最少的字说最多的话，他用沉默让读者看见冰山下的巨大世界。他是厄尼斯特·海明威，一个把写作当成搏斗的男人，一个用生命燃烧文学的传奇。先说说他的冰山理论，这是他最著名的写作主张。他说一座冰山之所以令人敬畏，是因为水面下有7%的部分你看不见。写作也一样，作家真正懂得的东西，可以不写出来，但读者仍然能感受到它的重量。这不是省略，这是一种深度。这是海明威给20世纪文学留下的最重要遗产。那他是谁呢？他怎么成为这样的人？故事要从1900年说起。1900年7月21日，海明威出生在美国伊利诺伊州橡树公园镇，那是个安静的中产阶级社区。父亲克拉伦斯是一位医生，喜欢打猎和钓鱼。母亲格雷斯是个热爱艺术的女性，在家教孩子们音乐和文化。这两种截然不同的气质，后来都流进了海明威的血液里。父亲带他去密歇根州的湖边度假，教他怎么钓鱼，怎么打猎，怎么在大自然中感受生命的节奏。这些户外经历后来成为他许多作品的灵魂。母亲则替他报名学习大提琴。虽然海明威对音乐的热情远不及文学，但那种对节奏和韵律的感知力，却悄悄滋养了他的文字。高中时代的海明威已经展现出惊人的语言天赋。他在学校报纸当记者，他的文字简洁有力，老师们都说这孩子天生会写东西。1917年高中毕业后，他没有去读大学，他选择去堪萨斯城的星报做见习记者。这个决定改变了他的一生。在星报工作的日子里，海明威学到了一套终身受用的写作准则。报社的风格手册要求记者使用短句，用积极主动的语态，删掉所有不必要的形容词，只写事实，只写眼前发生的事情。这些规则听起来很基础，但海明威把它们内化成了一种艺术。1918年，第一次世界大战正在欧洲燃烧，年轻的海明威热血沸腾，他想去前线，但视力问题让他无法通过军队体检。他于是报名加入了美国红十字会，以救护车司机的身份奔赴意大利战场。意大利的战场改变了他。1918年7月8日，海明威在意大利皮亚维和附近送物资给士兵，突然一枚奥匈帝国的迫击炮弹落在他脚边，爆炸的冲击波把他炸飞，弹片深深嵌入他的腿部和脚部，他身上中了227块弹片。然而这个18岁的年轻人没有倒下逃跑，他把一名更严重受伤的意大利士兵扛在背上，拖着受伤的身体继续走，直到意大利军队的子弹再次打中他的膝盖。他因此获得了意大利颁授的银质勇敢勋章。但他在米兰医院养伤的那段时间，另一件事深深影响了他。他爱上了一位7岁的护士，她叫艾格尼斯·冯·库洛斯基。这段未能修成正果的爱情，后来成为他第一部重要长篇小说的原型。伤愈回到美国后的海明威发现自己无法适应，他在战场见过的死亡和苦难，还有那段无疾而终的爱情，让他感到格格不入。他后来把这种状态叫做迷惘的一代，那是整个因战争而精神创伤的年轻人的集体状况。1920年代初，海明威在加拿大多伦多做了一段时间记者，然后在作家舍伍德·安德森的建议下，他带着第一任妻子哈德利·理查森去了巴黎。那是一个充满传奇的决定。1920年代的巴黎是全球艺术与思想的中心，海明威在那里认识了几乎所有重要的现代主义大师。格特鲁德·史坦因成了他的导师和精神母亲。他告诉他说，你们是迷惘的一代。这句话后来成了那个时代最著名的标签。他还结识了诗人艾兹拉·庞德，从庞德那里学到了如何用最精简的语言制造最大的张力。他跟詹姆斯·乔伊斯一起喝酒，跟费兹杰罗成为挚友又互相嫉妒。 那是一段奔放而混乱的岁月。海明威在巴黎咖啡馆里写作，在市场里观察人群，跑去看斗牛、钓鱼打猎，他把这些都变成文字的原料。1926年，他的第一部重要长篇小说问世，书名叫《太阳照常升起》。这本书震惊了文坛。他讲述一群在巴黎漂泊的美国和英国年轻人，他们喝酒、恋爱，去西班牙看斗牛，却没有一个人能找到生命的真正意义。主角杰克·巴恩斯因战争受伤，失去了爱的能力。他爱着美丽却放荡的布雷特·阿什利，却永远无法真正拥有她。海明威用最平静的语言写出了最深的绝望。这就是冰山理论的第一次完整示范。1929年，他写出了《战的春梦》，这是他最动人的爱情故事，以他在意大利的亲身经历为基础。主角弗雷德里克·亨利是一名美军救护车司机，他爱上了英国护士凯瑟琳·巴克利，两人在战火中相爱，逃离到瑞士。然而凯瑟琳在生产时难产而死。海明威只用了一个句子结束这本书，那个句子如同被冷水泼醒的一拳打在脸上。在这段时间里，海明威的生活也一样精彩混乱。他和哈德利离婚了，理由是他爱上了另一个女人，宝琳·菲佛。然后他又离婚，然后再结婚，一生总共结了4次婚。他的爱情生活就像他的小说一样，充满戏剧张力，却又带着挥之不去的悲凉。1930年代，海明威搬到了佛罗里达州的基维斯特，然后又在古巴哈瓦那买了一栋房子，叫做瞭望农场。他在那里钓大鱼，在加勒比海上驾船，继续写作。他养了很多猫，那些6只猫的后代据说今天还在基维斯特他的故居里生活着。1936年，西班牙内战爆发，海明威以记者身份奔赴战场。他深刻同情共和派，他在那里看到了20世纪最残酷的政治暴力，也在那里遇到了他的第3任妻子，战的记者玛莎·格尔霍恩。他们在战的咖啡馆相遇。海明威说他从没见过这样的女人，美丽勇敢又不依赖任何人。西班牙的战火经历激发了他的另一部杰作，1940年出版的《战的钟声》。故事发生在西班牙内战期间，美国人罗伯特·乔丹加入了共和派游击队，他们的任务是炸掉一座桥。在短短3天的故事里，海明威让我们看到了战争的勇气和残酷，爱情的甜蜜和短暂，死亡的庄重和必然。那座桥成了20世纪文学最著名的桥之一。1944年第2次世界大战期间，海明威再度以记者身份上前线，他随盟军登上了诺曼底海滩，进入了被解放的巴黎。那一幕他永生难忘。他说他感觉自己重新找回了神魔。战后的海明威回到古巴，继续他的渔猎生活，但他的健康开始走下坡。多年的饮酒，多次意外和伤病，让他的身体越来越吃不消。1952年，他写出了《老人与海》，这是他最后一部重要的长篇，也是他最著名的作品。老渔夫圣的牙哥独自出海，在深海中和一条巨大的马林鱼搏斗了3天3夜，他终于制服了那条鱼，把它绑在船边往岸上划。然而鲨鱼一群群赶来，把那条鱼咬得只剩骨架。最后他带着一副鱼骨回到港口，倒头沉沉睡去。这个故事的表面是一个老人和一条鱼的战斗，但水面下是神魔，是人类面对命运时的尊严，是失败本身的伟大，是一个人可以被摧毁，但不能被打败的信念。海明威用6万字说完了人类存在的最大命题。1953年，《老人与海》获得了普利兹奖。1954年，海明威获得诺贝尔文学奖。颁奖典礼上他没有亲自出席，因为他在飞机失事中受了重伤。他托人念了一段得奖感言，那段话是他最后一次在世界面前展示冰山。那段感言说，写作在最好的状态下是一种孤独的生涯。如果一个作家足够好，每天都要面对永恒，或者面对永恒的缺席。1960年代初，海明威的状况急速恶化，他患上了严重的忧郁症， 他的记忆力衰退，他的手颤抖，他写不出任何东西。对一个用写作定义自己生命的人来说，这比死亡更残忍。他曾接受电极疗法治疗，但那让他的记忆更加模糊。他说他们摧毁了我的大脑，就是为的是治疗我的忧郁症。一个作家最重要的工具是神魔，是记忆，而他的记忆正在一点一点流失。1961年7月2日清晨，在爱达荷州凯彻姆的家中，厄尼斯特·海明威用一把他最喜爱的猎枪，结束了自己的生命。他的父亲也曾以同样的方式离开，他的兄弟和妹妹后来也以同样的方式离开。这个家族的伤痛深入骨髓。他离开了，但他留下的东西没有离开。海明威留给文学世界的是神魔。首先是那种简洁如刀的文风，他证明了去掉多余的东西之后，留下来的每一个字都会变得更重。他让英语散文脱胎换骨。其次是他塑造的那种男子气概的文化形象，那个在荒野中打猎的男人，那个在海上独自搏斗的老渔夫，那个在战场前线仍能平静观察的战的记者。这些形象重新定义了神魔叫做勇气。然后是他对战争和死亡的书写，他不美化战争，也不廉价地描写死亡的恐惧，他让死亡保持它本来的尊严。这在文学史上是罕见的。后来的作家们几乎没有人能够不受他影响，从雷蒙德·卡佛的极简主义短篇，到科马克·麦卡锡的荒野书写，到今天无数的当代小说家，都能看见海明威的影子。有人问过他说你的秘诀是神魔？他说我每次在写得很顺畅的时候停下来，这样第二天我就知道从哪里继续。这不是偷懒，这是一种对创作节奏极其精确的控制。他还说过一句话让人记了一辈子。他说第一稿永远是狗屎，但你必须先把狗屎写出来，才能有东西可以修改。这就是海明威，一个不浪漫化写作的人。写作对他来说是劳动，是记忆，是每天的战斗。今天在读他的书，你会发现他的文字依然像冷水一样清醒，没有多余的装饰，没有卖弄的聪明，只有那些沉默的字句，和字句背后那座巨大的冰山。有时候我们以为说的越多，别人越能理解我们，但海明威用一生告诉我们相反的事。真正的深度藏在沉默里，真正的力量藏在克制里，真正的勇气是知道什么时候该停笔。海明威的故事就到这里。他用61年燃烧了一个传奇。他把那把枪对准的是他自己的痛苦，但他留下的文字是永恒的。谢谢你今天陪我一起走进这座冰山，希望你也找到你生命里那些值得沉默的深度。我们下次见咯。Hello everyone, I'm Jenny. Welcome to Thinker J. Today we are meeting one of the most influential writers of the 20th century. A man who said the most with the fewest words. A man who let silence reveal the enormous world beneath the surface. His name was Ernest Hemingway. A man who treated writing as combat. A legend who burned through life and turned it all into literature. Let us begin with his most famous idea. He called it the iceberg theory. He said that the dignity of movement of an iceberg is due to only 1/8 of it being above water. The same goes for writing. Everything a writer truly knows can stay beneath the surface. Unwritten, unspoken. But the reader will still feel its full weight. This is not omission. This is depth. This is the most important legacy Hemingway left to 20th century literature. But who was this man? How did he become who he was? The story begins in 1900. On July 21, 1900, Hemingway was born in Oak Park, Illinois. It was a quiet middle-class town. His father Clarence was a doctor with a deep love of hunting and fishing. His mother Grace was a woman passionate about art and culture. She taught her children music and appreciated beauty in all its forms. These two very different influences would flow together in Hemingway throughout his life. His father took him to the lake country of Michigan for summer vacations. He taught the boy how to fish, how to hunt, how to feel the rhythm of life in the natural world. Those outdoor experiences would later become the soul of many of his stories. His mother enrolled him in cello lessons. Though Hemingway never developed the same passion for music that his mother had. A sensitivity to rhythm and pacing crept quietly into his writing anyway. By high school Hemingway was already showing a remarkable gift for language. He wrote for the school newspaper. His sentences were clean and powerful. His teachers all agreed that this boy had been born to write. After graduating in 1917, he did not go to university. Instead, he took a job as a cub reporter at the Kansas City Star. That decision changed everything. At the Star, Hemingway absorbed a set of writing rules that would guide him for the rest of his life. The style guide told reporters to use short sentences. Write in active voice. Cut all unnecessary adjectives. Report only the facts. Write only what is happening right in front of you. These principles sound basic. But Hemingway transformed them into an art form. In 1918, World War I was burning across Europe. The young Hemingway was consumed by the desire to go. But poor eyesight kept him from passing the military physical. He signed up with the American Red Cross instead. And shipped out to Italy as an ambulance driver. The Italian front changed him forever. On July 5, 1918, he was delivering supplies to soldiers near the Piave River. Without warning, an Austro-Hungarian mortar shell landed at his feet. The blast hurled him off the ground. Shrapnel tore into his legs and feet. He carried 220 pieces of metal in his body. Yet this 18-year-old did not run. He lifted a more seriously wounded Italian soldier onto his back. And carried him forward on his torn and bleeding legs. Until Italian machine gun fire hit him in the knee. He received the Italian Silver Medal of Bravery for that act. But during his long recovery in a Milan hospital, something else happened that would shape him just as deeply. He fell in love with a nurse 7 years older than him. Her name was Agnes von Kurowski. The love affair did not survive. She eventually ended it in a letter. And the wound of that loss became the emotional core of his first great novel. Back in America after the war, Hemingway could not fit in anywhere. The death and suffering he had witnessed, the love he had lost, left him feeling like a stranger in his own country. He later described this condition as the feeling of a lost generation. A collective numbness shared by young people whose souls had been scorched by the war. In the early 1920s, Hemingway worked briefly as a reporter in Toronto. Then, on the advice of the writer Sherwood Anderson, he packed up his first wife Hadley Richardson and moved to Paris. It was a legendary decision. Paris in the 1920s was the center of global art and thought. In Paris, Hemingway met nearly every major modernist figure of his time. Gertrude Stein became his mentor and something like a spiritual godmother. She told him that he and his peers were all a lost generation. Those words became the defining label of that entire era. He also connected with the poet Ezra Pound. From Pound he absorbed lessons on how to generate maximum tension from minimum language. He drank with James Joyce. He formed a friendship with F. Scott Fitzgerald that was equal parts admiration and rivalry. Those years were wild and chaotic and completely alive. Hemingway wrote in Paris cafes. He watched crowds in the markets. He went to bullfights. He fished and hunted whenever he could. He turned all of it into raw material for his sentences. In 1920, his first major novel appeared. It was called The Sun Also Rises. The book stunned the literary world. It followed a group of American and British expatriates drifting through Paris and Spain. They drank heavily, fell in and out of love, and traveled to Pamplona to watch the bullfights. But none of them could find any real meaning. The narrator Jake Barnes had been wounded in the war in a way that robbed him of the ability to love physically. He loved the beautiful and reckless Brett Ashley. But he could never truly have her. Hemingway wrote the deepest despair in the calmest language imaginable. This was the first full demonstration of the iceberg theory. In 1920 he published his most tender novel, Called A Farewell to Arms. The story was rooted in his own Italian experience. An American ambulance officer named Frederick Henry falls in love with a British nurse named Catherine Barclay. They love each other in the middle of the war. They escape together to Switzerland. But Catherine dies in childbirth. Hemingway ended the novel with a single sentence. That sentence hit readers like a cold fist to the face. During this period his personal life was just as turbulent as his fiction. He left Hadley for another woman named Pauline Pfeiffer. Then left Pauline too. He would be married 4 times in total. His love life had all the dramatic tension of his novels. And the same undertone of inescapable sadness. Through the 1920s Hemingway set LED in Key West, Florida. And later bought a house in Havana, Cuba, which he called Finca Vigia, meaning lookout farm. He fished for marlin in the Gulf Stream. He sailed across the Caribbean. He kept writing. He kept a large collection of cats. The descendants of his 6-toed cats are said to still roam his Key West home today. In 1920 the Spanish Civil War broke out. Hemingway went to cover it as a journalist. He felt deep sympathy for the Republican side. He witnessed some of the most brutal political violence of the 20th century. And in a cafe in Madrid he met the woman who became his third wife. War correspondent Martha Gellhorn. He said he had never seen anyone like her. Beautiful, fearless, and completely self-sufficient. The Spanish experience inspired another masterpiece. In 1940 he published the novel Call Ed for Whom the Bell Tolls. Set during the Spanish Civil War. An American named Robert Jordan joins a Republican guerrilla unit. Their mission is to blow up a bridge. In just 3 days of story time, Hemingway showed us the courage and cruelty of war, the sweetness and brevity of love, the solemnity and inevitability of death. That bridge became one of the most famous bridges in 20th century literature. In 1940 during World War II, Hemingway returned to war as a correspondent. He was present during the D-Day landings at Normandy. And he entered liberated Paris with the Allied forces. He said the sight of Paris free again gave something back to him that he thought was gone forever. After the war, Hemingway returned to Cuba. He continued his life of fishing and hunting. But his health began to fail. Years of heavy drinking, multiple accidents and injuries, were taking a heavy toll on his body. In 1940 he wrote what would become his most celebrated work. A short novel called Ed the Old Man and the Sea. An old fisherman named Santiago goes out to sea alone. In the deep water he battles an enormous marlin for 3 days and 3 nights. He finally subdues the great fish, ties it to the side of his small boat, and begins the long row back to shore. But sharks come. One after another they tear into the marlin. By the time Santiago reaches the harbor, only a skeleton remains. He carries it ashore and falls into a deep sleep. On the surface this is a story about an old man and a fish. But beneath the surface, it is about the dignity of a human being facing fate. About the greatness that exists inside failure itself. About the belief that a man can be destroyed, but not defeated. Hemingway said what needed to be said about human existence in 60,000 words. The Old Man and the Sea won the Pulitzer Prize in 1950. In 1950 Hemingway was awarded the Nobel Prize in Literature. He did not attend the ceremony in person. He had been seriously injured in 2 consecutive plane crashes in Africa. He sent a written acceptance speech to be read in his absence. That speech was his final full demonstration of the iceberg. He wrote that writing at its best is a lonely life. That a writer who does his work well must confront eternity. Or the absence of eternity. Every single day. By the early 1960s his condition had deteriorated rapidly. He was suffering from severe depression. His memory was failing. His hands trembled. He could no longer write anything that satisfied him. For a man who had defined his entire life through writing, this was a cruelty worse than death. He received electroconvulsive therapy treatments. But the sessions left his memory even more fragmented. He said they had destroyed his brain in order to cure his depression. For a writer, memory is the most essential tool. And his was slipping away piece by piece. On the morning of July 1961, in his home in Ketchum, Idaho, Ernest Hemingway ended his life with one of his favorite hunting rifles. His father had done the same. His brother and his sister would later do the same. The grief of that family ran deep into the bone. He was gone. But what he left behind was not. What did Hemingway leave to the world of literature? First, that blade-sharp spare style. He proved that when you remove everything unnecessary, every word that remains becomes heavier and more powerful. He transformed English prose. Second, he gave culture an image of a certain kind of courage. The man hunting alone in the wilderness. The old fisherman fighting alone on the sea. The war correspondent watching calmly from the front lines. These figures redefined what it means to be brave. Then there was his writing about war and death. He never romanticized war. He never cheapened death with easy fear. He let death keep its own solemn weight. This is rare in literary history. Nearly every writer who came after him was shaped by his influence. From Raymond Carver and his minimalist short stories, to Cormac McCarthy and his wilderness prose, to countless contemporary novelists working today, you can see Hemingway's shadow everywhere. Someone once asked him what his secret was. He said he always stopped writing when things were going well. That way the next morning he always knew where to begin. This was not laziness. This was an extraordinarily precise control of creative rhythm. He also said something that people have never forgotten. He said the first draft of anything is always terrible. But you have to write the terrible version first, before you have anything worth fixing. This was Hemingway. A man who refused to romanticize the act of writing. For him writing was labor. It was craft. It was a daily fight. Reading his books today, you find that his language is still as clear as cold water. No ornaments. No clever showing off. Just those quiet sentences. And the enormous iceberg hiding beneath them. Sometimes we think that the more we say, the better others understand us. But Hemingway spent a whole life teaching us the opposite. True depth lies in silence. True strength lies in restraint. True courage is knowing when to put down the pen. That is the story of Hemingway. He burned through 61 years and turned them into a legend. The rifle he turned on himself ended his suffering. But the words he left behind are permanent. Thank you for walking into this iceberg with me today. I hope you find the depths in your own life that are worth keeping silent. See you next time.